just having to like pay attention to your sleep and pay attention to your nutrition and to pay attention to where your mind's at and to pay attention to you making sure your body's recovered and just that all of those things that I didn't think about when I was 18 or 19 years old, we're asking them to do. And if they don't do it, they're probably not going to have the success that they want.
This is the Tournament Code.
We appreciate you taking the time to join us, Coach Webb. We know that you're the head coach at Tennessee, obviously. You've coached a few other places, and then prior to that, you played a little bit. So before we start on your whole career progression, let's start at the beginning and just how you got into playing the game of golf.
Yeah, well, it's very fortunate. I grew up at South Muskoka Curling and Golf Club in Bracebridge, Ontario, about 100 miles north of Toronto. My dad was the club pro there, and so I essentially grew up at the golf course. Our house was on the 11th tee. Kind of really the only life I knew was being at the golf course. Certainly for the 6 months of the year, there wasn't snow on the ground. So that was my introduction, and was pretty fortunate to be able to do that.
Growing up in Canada, did you play any other sports? Like, I know hockey's super popular up there, or did you just kind of stick to golf?
I played every sport you could play. If they were keeping score, I was playing it. Ran track, played baseball, played hockey, played basketball. Whatever there was available, I was doing it.
So when it came to playing tournament golf and stuff like that, when did you start getting to play in actual tournaments?
Probably got serious about playing tournaments when I was 12 years old. You know, at that time, the age divisions were 13 and under, 14, 15, 16, and then 17, 18. And so when I was 12, that's kind of when it got into that and started to compete for those under 13 or 13 and under titles. And so I can just remember that summer being the first summer that I played a lot of tournament golf.
And so after that, you know, you got better. Like everybody has a progression. In your case, you went on to play at Eastern Tennessee State, and that was a really good team you were on and part of. I know you guys came in third, I believe, in the NCAA championships and were ranked number one at one point, if my memory serves me correctly. But as part of that process, you know, coming from Canada, I don't know exactly what you were thinking as far as like, hey, like I want to go to college in the U.S. Like, was that something you knew you wanted to do? And did you know you wanted to play college golf in the U.S., or were you thinking about doing other things as well?
No, that was kind of always what my plans were to do. That, you know, that was something that my dad had talked about when I was really young, you know, that being an option. And I can remember if we were coming down to, you know, even come out on spring break or go on family vacations, every time we went by a university or a college, my dad would be like, oh, maybe one day you could go play golf there. So it was always something in the back of my mind. It was always my goal. And I was, you know, very fortunate to be able to go to ETSU and play on a really, really, really good team.
So going into college, did you always think, you know, I want to try to play professionally on the PGA Tour, or was that something that you realized while you were there?
No, that was always something I was going to do in my mind. I was going to be the first Canadian that won the Masters. I'm going to go play the PGA Tour, and that was going to be my life. So that was all I ever thought of, all I ever wanted to do, and where my passion lied for sure.
So going to college, how exactly did you decide on what school you're going to? And then beyond that, once you got there, was it different than, imagine like high school golf or junior golf? How much different was it playing against other college players?
Yeah, I mean, the recruiting process was certainly enjoyable. I was fortunate to get an opportunity to come down and play a couple AJGA tournaments and had some success. But my biggest thing was I qualified for the U.S. Junior and then made it to the round of 16. And so that kind of opened up a lot of doors for me there that had probably put myself on some coaches' radars that hadn't been on before. And so the interesting thing was I really didn't know a whole lot about the university college system as far as, you know, what the SEC was, what the ACC was. I knew Michigan football and I knew Syracuse basketball because that's what we got on TV growing up. And I just, you know, ETSU, they were, I think, 9th or 10th in the country at the time, offering a pretty good scholarship. I was like, I'll just go there. They're top 10 in the country. And so got there and, you know, I enjoyed it immensely. It certainly was different than junior golf, and the level was much, much higher than I was, used to. So that was a little bit eye opening, but, in the end, beneficial to me.
So when you play on a good team like that, a lot of times guys, improve their game just because of their teammates. And it can be the opposite when you play on bad teams. Sometimes teams just regress, but you played on a really good team. What did you learn from your teammates and learn playing against that type of competition in college?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing was just the work ethic and the level of work that was required to be that elite level. I've played with guys that have gone on and won on the PGA Tour, with Eric Axley and Garrett Willis, two or three other guys that played Walker Cup, a couple guys that played the European Tour. Keith Nolan played the PGA Tour for a number of years. I think at one stage we had 6 or 7 guys on that team that eventually had full status on at least the Korn Ferry Tour. So be around those guys every day. I mean, all we did was gamble and try and beat each other's brains in, and just every day you learn something. But just the competitive arena, and just to be around guys that were elite competitors and achievers, was awesome. But the little things you pick up, I still tell my guys now a shot around a short game shot around the greens that Keith Nolan taught me when we were in college. So it's just cool to be around guys like that, and being around those guys not only helped me in college, but into my professional career as well.
Kind of going into your professional career, I want to talk about that career in particular. And so the fact that you got to the second stage of PGA Tour Q School 8 out of 9 times, and at one point you got full status on the Korn Ferry Tour. Just talk about how, first of all, how hard it is to make it, and then how you were able to kind of still have that consistency, and you still played, very well through those 8 or 9 years.
Yeah, I think one thing that helped me as far as Q School went is, when we were playing throughout the summer, my goal was always just to be prepared for Q School. And because at the end of the day, I knew that if you weren't going to get through Q School, it didn't really matter. You weren't going to have a sustainable career as a professional golfer. So I probably sacrificed some results during the summer to be prepared for Q School. The hard part is if you get to that second stage and don't make it, you're back to essentially square one. And being there and getting that close every year, it kind of just kept you going as well. And then finally get through a couple times, that was, the best feeling ever, and made all of that work and sacrifice worthwhile. I tell people all the time, they have no idea how good of players the elite players are in Division I college golf. And then that's even more so, they have no idea how good the guys on the PGA Tour are. It's not something that somebody that isn't around it all the time can even grasp the concept of how good those guys are.
That's the truth. When we're playing, we actually played a round earlier this summer. Me, Cooper, and one of our buddies who's on Korn Ferry just secured full-time Korn Ferry status last year, and we've all known each other a while. And I was coming in as like 2 handicap, maybe a 5 handicap, something in that range. It's never that sure where I'm at because of how much, depending on how much time I've actually been playing. So we came into that round, and Cooper's not playing full time anymore or anything like that. He's a +3. He's given me, I think, 6 shots or 8 shots, and the Korn Ferry guy is giving me, I think he gave me 15 shots or something like that. And it was a pretty dead even match for the most part. And that's just, he's a great player, but that's just at the Korn Ferry level. Every step you go up, the guys are just a little better, it seems like. So playing in on the Korn Ferry, I know you had 3 top 25 finishes. Tell us about what it was like going on that circuit and competing in those events. I know it's a little bit different in college. You have a few events in the spring, a few events in the fall, whereas there, you're having to go around, and in one sense, you want to play as many tournaments as you can just to give yourself the opportunity to do well. But at the same time, you also got to save your energy some.
Yeah, I mean, if I look back, that's probably the biggest mistake I made. I got off to a pretty good start. I was probably in the top 50 on the money list after 6 or 7 events, and then went out and played and kept playing. And as things got tougher and tougher, and I was not in the best of mental state as you're just kind of trying to hold on and keep your card. I think I played 11 weeks in a row at one stage, and my wife was at home pregnant with our first child. So all of those things, if I could look back, I'd like to have played 3 tournaments and come home and and relaxed and understood that, yeah, somebody was out there making some money that week and probably going to pass me on the money list, but that was okay because I was going to be in a much better place that following week to go and play. So yeah, it's tough because you work so hard to get out there, and the last thing you want to do is lose that status again. And so yeah, that's the one thing looking back that I wish I had conserved my energy and been in a better mental state going through that process for sure.
Yeah, that's something that we talked to a former Korn Ferry player about a few episodes ago, and he was saying, he was hovering around the number to keep his card, but he just wanted to keep playing. And I think at one point he was forced to take a week off, and then he ended up playing really well the next week, but it was just a tough mental battle to kind of, get yourself to take time off. I kind of want to go back to what you were talking about previously about what, nobody really has an idea of how good the PGA Tour players are. And I think everybody, has a different answer to this, but what do you think makes them that good in most scenarios?
Well, they don't have any weaknesses. I hear all these, the guys like, well, I didn't putt well this week. And that, like, them not putting well is the best putting round that most people have ever had in their life. So, yeah, they're all really, really, really good physically, but the belief that they have, the mental outlook they have, the way that they can kind of compartmentalize their feelings while they're playing during competition at those levels, all of these things that lead to elite performance, and they're just really, really good at. And at the end of the day, they all believe, why they're out there and how they're there and trust their talents better than everybody else.
So when it comes to playing on the PGA Tour and playing on the Korn Ferry, as you mentioned, there's also personal life that goes on. You got married at one point during this time, and then your wife is at home, pregnant, like all those types of things are things that you have to manage as an adult, and as being someone who has to potentially like provide for the family. I can imagine that is a stressful scenario. Neither Cooper nor I have kids. My wife is due in June with our first, but I could imagine, like, I talk with my buddies now who are out there and already for themselves, they're sweating. Like sometimes like they try not to think about the money, but the point is like, yeah, you're out there to play golf. You're out there to be the best. But at the end of the day, if you're out there doing that and not making any money, then you'd be going and finding something else to do because you got to live, you got to survive, and you got to provide. So when it comes to having a wife, when it comes to having a kid, how did you balance that? And did your life change at all once you had a kid and were playing professionally?
Yeah, I was fine once Nala was born. It was while Carrie was pregnant that really, kind of got in my head. I think I was, like I said, inside the top 50 on the money list. I was, had a chance to win Louisiana, which is probably the fifth or sixth event. Had, ended up, I don't know, finishing 12th or something, but had a putt for the lead with like 6 holes to go. And Carrie flew out to California the next week and told me she was pregnant. I think I missed like 15 of the next 17 cuts. It was just too much for me. All of a sudden, that putt, that first Friday in San Francisco that next week, I can still remember vividly. I was playing with Paul Gal from Australia, and I had like a 4-footer on 14. Like I was inside the cut number, and I just kind of hit the worst putt of all time, thinking about, man, I need to make the cut this week to make some money. And it just, looking back, obviously that's not the right mindset, but it was all of a new experience for me. And I wish I could go back and change my mind. I didn't have to change anything else. Didn't need to work harder or change my game. It was good enough to be where it was at that time. Once Nala was born, I actually played probably as well as I'd ever had that next year. Won a couple, bigger tournaments and lost in a couple playoffs and played in PGA Tour event in New Orleans. And at that time it was fine. It was just the unknown, I guess, and the anxiety of what that, came from that unknown was hard for me. So that's the one thing I wish I could go back and change my mindset about for sure. But yeah, there's lots of things going on, and I see it even now with my guys. They show up one day and they're just lethargic and not in a good mood and not acting the way they act. And it's not their golf; it's just something else, and that's just part of trying to do this. Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods and all those guys, they all go through it as great as they were.
So that's a perfect transition in part when you have one of your guys who comes to you and maybe doesn't say, hey, things are not going the best in my personal life, but you can tell, something's off. He's not performing the way he normally would, or he's not at least coming with the attitude that he normally would. What do you do with your experience? Say, hey, like, let me see if I can help jumpstart this process, help at least get him back in the game mentally, or what can I do to at least get him back on the right track?
Yeah, I think that's where my advantage as a coach is that whatever they're going through, I've probably gone through it. And I understand, I've got, the ability to look back and go, well, I wish I had, this is what I did. I wish I had done this, or I've been around somebody that's gone through it and handled it probably better than I did. And so I'm just I try and be pretty vulnerable as a coach and share what I've gone through and share the mistakes that I've made and the feelings I had, and make them understand it's okay. It's life, and doesn't make them a bad person to be feeling that way. But here's, where you can maybe feel a little bit better or learn to handle these feelings and still perform.
So on the topic of coaching, I know you started your career out at South Florida. What made you decide to go into coaching, and how has your career progressed from there?
Yeah, what made me decide to go into coaching is I didn't want to work in the financial community like I had done all my stuff, licenses and certifications for. So I lost my Korn Ferry card, and obviously Nala was born. It was time to, get a job. I ended up missing that second stage of Q school that last year, and I spent the next summer caddying for a friend of mine on the senior tour and a couple other guys here and there, and did all my licenses and certifications for financial planning, and had a really, really good job lined up. And I'm sure Carrie was like, thank God, we're finally going to have a stable paycheck. This is going to be amazing. And about 2 weeks before that happened, I saw an advertisement for the University of South Florida assistant coach position. I was like, oh, I've always kind of thought about doing that. I'll try that. It's only 5 minutes from my house. We'll see how that goes. And Chris Malloy, who's the coach at Ole Miss now, my best friend, he was just gotten the job at South Florida, and I'd never met Chris before, had no experience coaching, and I just kind of bombarded them with phone calls and emails and text messages like, hey, let me try this. And the job was paying $24,000 a year. Chris wanted someone younger, that didn't have a kid, that didn't need the money, but eventually he figured out he wasn't going to be able to hire anyone any good for $24,000. So he gave me a shot, and so I was there for a year. Had a great time. Learned a lot from Chris. He was pretty young, energetic, and go getter. We recruited really, really hard and got some really good players to come. Eventually, those guys ended up being team that made it to match play at the NCAA championship. But both Chris and I had gone by that time. Those guys had gotten older. But after a year, got my biggest break in coaching, surely, and got to be the assistant coach at Georgia Tech and go up there for 3 years and learn from Coach Hepler, who in my mind is the best that's ever done this. And took that experience and went and worked for my buddy Whit Turnbow up at Middle Tennessee State, who had gone from being a golf coach into administration. He had set up the program to have a tremendous amount of success through the resources and facilities that they had. So was up there for 3 years, had the most unbelievable time, met some of my closest friends, lived in a great city in Murfreesboro. But then the opportunity to come to Knoxville presented itself, and it was just too good a place to turn down, despite how much fun I was having in Murfreesboro. And now I've been here in my 5th season. So to get here in my 6th season of coaching was incredible. The number of very, very fortunate things that had to happen for that to happen, I can't even think to go back on all the little things that could have changed that path. But just very, very fortunate, man, to get here and have my dream job and work at a place that we can do whatever we can set out to do. So that was my long story, but it was a great path and very fortunate more than anything.
No, that is really cool. And you say, there's some luck involved, sure, but for someone to move that quickly and then have sustained success, it indicates something more than luck, which is having a knack for what you're doing. And you might not have ever coached before going to USF, but it seems like pretty quickly you figured out that it was something that you would be able to do pretty well. And if you didn't figure it out, at least you figured out how to do it pretty well. As far as the first part you mentioned there, being at USF and going heavily into recruiting, moving from playing professional golf to recruiting high school players, what was that difference like? And having been in those shoes yourselves, what did you take from your past experiences to, think, hey, here's the type of player I want to look for? here's the type of guy I want playing on my team?
The thing that attracted me to the recruiting was the competitive nature of it, and still just having those juices going and be able to go and get a guy that maybe would have gone to Florida State if we weren't recruiting him, or a bigger school like that. That was really cool for me, and I went all in. And Coach Hepler told me in my first job interview, he said, "I don't know what you're doing down there, but every coach in Florida wants you out of there." So that made me feel good that I was had ruffled some feathers and in the establishment, and that was cool. So that was like really good. The first thing I kind of do remember was like I didn't think anyone was any good because I had from what I had been watching for the last 8 or 9 years, and certainly hadn't really remembered what junior golf was like. That was cool, but that after a while you kind of recognize what level is and see the guys that go on success and what it takes, and so that was cool. And then as the years have gone by, I've certainly refined what I'm looking for. It's not all about the results, but the results are important, obviously. They do transfer as much as people say, well, if I just had a shot, it's not, that you can't, that's the thing about golf is the scores don't lie. That as we've gone forward, I've certainly, looked at some other things, maybe off the golf course stuff that I wouldn't have early on in my career.
College golf and college golf coaching in particular is a kind of a unique challenge. You guys are mandated to have a certain amount of time to practice each week. And I saw a Kobe Bryant quote about a week ago, and it said, "It's not how many hours you practice, it's how many hours you practice when your mind's present." I think that really resonated with me because I would just grind and grind on the range, but I might not have always been super present. And I just wanted to know like how you get your guys to maximize their time while they're practicing throughout the week.
Yeah, I mean, our mindset is the thing that I talk about the most. These guys work really, really, really hard. It's certainly the most talented team I've ever been around. They're incredible talents. And so when things are off, it's because of the way they're thinking more than anything. And so that's the stuff that we talk about a lot. We don't do a lot of organized practices. We probably don't even come close to using those 20 hours, Cooper, just because I trust and believe that these guys are going to do the right things. And if they don't, it's going to show up in their scores, and then we'll have a talk. But right now, with the group that we have right now, it's kind of trying to get them to calm down a little bit and maybe just like, let's go inside and chill for 30 minutes and talk about some other stuff instead of being out here hitting, some more drivers and chips and stuff. So it's, every group's different. The first team I got here that, they had to be kind of taught how to practice, and they certainly, took those lessons and ran with them, but it kind of just cycles. But it goes back to the recruiting. If you recruit the right guys, you don't have to tell them to work hard. You got to tell them to kind of where they're thinking.
And in that recruiting process, you said, Florida guys wanted you out of there because you were taking a lot of good recruits. And it seems like at every level you've had success on the recruiting side. And you said, scores don't lie. Like you look for off the course things for sure, but scores don't lie to a degree. But when you're recruiting guys, like everybody wants the guy that shoots the lowest score or shoots the lower scores. Everybody wants that guy. And you have like Tennessee's probably an easier place to recruit from than somewhere else. But when it came to those other schools, you still had profound success in recruiting. What about you do you think separated you when talking to these recruits? They're like, hey, he might not be at the time. Hey, he might not be at Tennessee, but I want to go play for him. I want to be there. He can help me do this. What really separated you, do you think?
Probably just being honest and brutally honest about, what my expectations were, what it was going to be like. It wasn't as much of a sales pitch as kind of just to maybe push the guys away and see which ones came coming back for it. And I feel like that's really helped me get the guys that end up having success in college that maybe weren't as highly, ranked or recruited, but, we're a top 15 team in the country, depending on the poll right now. And two of the guys in our starting lineup were coming to Middle Tennessee to play for me, that weren't getting recruited by anybody at the time. But through the recruiting process and talking to them, I could figure out what was on their inside a little bit more that maybe some other people hadn't figured out, and was able to get them to come to Middle Tennessee. And so, and now they're, guys are both going to be probably all Americans and all regional players this year at the highest level. So that I think just taking that time and going at it, and it's not like I'm not selling, hey, if you come here, this is going to be the most enjoyable experience of your life and everything's going to be great every single day and you're going to shoot 65 all the time because we have this, and this. It's just like, this is going to be really hard. And you need to understand that this isn't going to be the easiest thing. And you're probably just going to be one of 7 or 8 really, really, really good players instead of the big fish that you've been your whole life and everyone telling you how great you are. This isn't it. So, but you tell me you want to go play the PGA Tour and this is what it takes and this is the environment that can help you get there.
And so when you say, hey, like you come here, it's going to be tough. What exactly, walk me through maybe what a day in the life looks like or a week in the life of one of your players looks like. Because as you said, you guys might not use up those 20 hours of like structured practice that you have. But as we know from playing in college, you practice plenty more than 20 hours on your own. So what exactly are your guys doing week in, week out to keep continuing to get better?
Yeah, I mean, that's, obviously the workouts we do in the mornings, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m. Guys will do extra stuff. I think we had a few guys going to yoga after that this morning. Then they're going to go to class, go eat lunch at 12 and be out here. I guess today, actually, we're going to go qualify when we go out and play. But if not, they'll come out here. And, most of the time I'll leave here at 6:30 and there's still guys out chipping and putting. And they got here at, 1 o'clock. But it's not just that, not just the time, but just having to like pay attention to your sleep and pay attention to your nutrition and to pay attention to where your mind's at and to pay attention to you making sure your body's recovered and just that, all of those things that I didn't think about when I was 18 or 19 years old, we're asking them to do. And if they don't do it, they're probably not going to have the success that they want. And so to be able to be that young and to make mature decisions and kind of grow up a little bit faster than the guys that they went to high school with that are here as normal students, that's the hard part. It's not the hours of practice or anything that I don't think myself, like that to me was always easy, but I'm not sure if I've been able to do all the other things that these guys have to do now.
In the short term, it's plenty more fun to go out and party, but in the long term, it's plenty more fun to win tournaments and play good golf. So
yeah,
I understand that perfectly. When it comes to, we've talked kind of like what a week in the life of one of the players looks like, but beyond that, you said you had qualifying coming up. You got tournaments coming up. Tell us a little bit first. What does your qualifying process look like? We've had some. I've known some coaches. Some guys qualify for everything. Some qualify for some spots. Some guys are perpetual. There are some picks, etc. And one of the most recent ones I can remember, we talked with Jesse Mudd over at Lamar, and an interesting story of his was when he played at Florida. This was back in 06, 07. He came in his first year, played really good, got injured his second year, and then his third year he came back. He was able to play in some tournaments, and the tough part for him was he was qualifying. Like he was in the top 5, but because he was older and really wasn't playing that good at golf week in and week out, he would get knocked out for coach's pick of most of the time. And so I think his last year, I don't think he played in a tournament. And so for him, when he's at Lamar now, he says essentially everything he does is 100%. You got to qualify for everything. He said there's only 2 times I've ever knocked out a guy for a pick, and essentially was the guy was like, it was a course where you needed to hit driver, and in qualifying the guy was so scared of his driver he was only hitting 2 irons or 4 irons. He's like, I can't bring you to this tournament where I know you're gonna struggle. And I know I went a little long-winded there, but from your perspective, having played college golf, having coached at a bunch of different places, having played professionally, how do you handle the qualifying process?
Yeah, it's different. I've gone all over the map during my career. I think if I were to say that the mistakes I've made is when I've been gun shy from qualifying, or I felt like I know the 5 guys, and even though they're not maybe playing the best at home, they're the ones that have the best resumes and they're going to have the most success. So I think it's a combination. It'd be crazy for me to make Caleb Surratt and Bryce Lewis qualify to go to every tournament when they're both, top 20 players in the entire world. For those guys, I know they're going to be prepared. I know that they're going to be ready when the lights turn on. And so they're in qualifying, but I'm sure everybody in our squad pretty much realizes they're going to be at every tournament. And so there's a little mixture of that. But then there's guys that really need to go through that process and beat somebody. And right now we have probably 8 guys that could play anywhere in the country. And so it's not for me to say, yeah, you can come and you can't. So those guys are in the qualifying a lot. I think last year I didn't do as much qualifying as I wanted to, or as I should have, and we didn't have as much success in postseason as we should have based on where we were ranked. So this year I've kind of made a promise to myself that we're going to keep qualifying all the way through and do that and make sure guys are prepared for it. So it's kind of, like I said, a mixture. We're not going to, I've played for 5 spots before and finished 13th out of 15th the next week. And so I'm probably never, ever, ever going to do that. And that was with a team that was top 25 in the country. So that's probably not going to be the case. But, you know, I think when you get down to it, the 5 guys on the road have earned it. And that's what we're looking to do.
So I want to go in and talk about Caleb Surratt some. You know, he's obviously one of the best players in the country. He's already played in multiple PGA Tour events this year. Second one being where he qualified for the Farmers Insurance Open. First off, like, what makes him so good? What are his daily habits that make him so good? And second off, just a question, you know, kind of a personal question. Like, did you support him, you know, staying out there playing in that Monday qualifier? I know a lot of college coaches would probably say, you know, you need to come back, you need to prep for college. But he went on and played in that Monday qualifier, got through, and he was out there for another week, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was all for that. I mean, he's a different animal. That's where he's going. That's where he's, you know, he acts like he's been, and in the right way, he's acting that way. He does the things that those guys do. And so for me, for him to be around those guys and to learn a little bit more and just to kind of keep developing all the elite that he has already, I'm all for it. It was the first week of class. You don't ever do anything the first week of class anyways, except get the syllabus. So with online classes and the first week of class, it was not a big deal. He was doing some homework out there. I flew out to caddy for him, so I was able to kind of make sure that he was on top of his schoolwork. So he's as much school as he missed, he's still over 3.0 and does the work and understands he needs to be good at that stuff too. So yeah, that's it. But you actually kind of hit the nail on his head. What makes him elite is his daily habits. You think about somebody that does everything at a professional level as an 18-year-old. It's Caleb. It's scary that how much effort and thought he puts into his days. The first time that I got to spend a whole lot of time with him in a competitive environment, I went and caddied for him at the U.S. Junior this year. He had started summer school here already, so I was able to do that and spent, you know, he made it to the finals, so I spent 6 days with him, 36 holes a day in competition. We stayed in the same condo, so I got to see his preparation each day and then his kind of post reflection each day. And when we got done, he was disappointed he lost, but I told him, I was like, man, I have earned so much respect for you. Not because you played well, like I know that already, but just the habits that you have and the way you handle yourself in all these situations, it's incredible. I can remember, you know, he's going into the finals. It was a 36-hole day, and first shot was going to be at 7:45. And Caleb's routine is he gets up 3 hours before his round, and he had been doing that for 5 days. And so he's pretty whipped, and he's just played 36 holes the last 2 days. And I was like, what time are you getting up tomorrow? And he said, 4:45, and that was that. You know, it wasn't like, oh, maybe I'll get an extra 15 minutes or 30 minutes, or he's like, this is just what I'm going to do because I know if I keep doing this stuff, I'm going to go get to achieve all my dreams and the things that I've set out for myself. So it's been awesome to be around him. It's been awesome for our guys. It's been awesome for me, and I'm really glad he chose to be a part of this. I'm really glad he's had some ups and some downs and taken the time to learn from all of those things.
No, I watched there's kind of like a walking interview that the PGA Tour did with him, and he was talking about how he had woken up at like 5 or something that morning to do homework. And I was like, you know, there's not too many kids in the country that would still do their homework when they just qualified for a PGA Tour event that early in the morning. But I kind of want to talk about what you mentioned earlier. So his preparation and his reflection, you know, something that we're really interested in helping players with is not only the preparation, but also the reflection after the tournament round. I think that's really important. And what are some of the specific things he did to both prepare and reflect?
That's something I've kind of shared with my guys. I talked to Caleb before and after every round he played basically this summer, and even the bad ones. And I think that's really important that it doesn't have to be with your coach or with your college coach, but with somebody or something, whether it's journaling or just talking to your girlfriend about it. It's important to learn from every day and every experience, and so you can be better for the next one instead of just shove it off and say, it was a good day, or it was a bad day, or I got unlucky, or I made some putts. I just don't think you learn anything from that. And so it's I've tried to like incorporate a little bit in with our guys, and even it's always a struggle just to get guys to do stats. That's always been a struggle for me, and it's 5 minutes. It's not that much time, but guys get going and start thinking about other stuff. And I think the stats aren't really the super most important part, but the fact to have to go back and think about your round and reflect on it. And so we've come up with couple different strategies for some guys. Some guys have started writing down all of the good shots they hit that day, and just writing that down and going back through those and just building a little bit more belief and confidence that way. We've had a couple different things, but I think it's really, really important. I try and, write down things I've learned each day in my notebook, and to be able to go back and look at it. And then to be honest, like that's where going back to qualifying, that's where I like kind of made that promise to myself. We're going to qualify the rest of this year, because after NCAA's last year, I was very disappointed, and I wrote down all of the things that I learned from that experience. And that was one of them. Like, you have to qualify. You have to have qualifying. And I didn't really think about it again until probably August. And I went back and looked and read those notes, and that's when we did. And I don't know, maybe if I hadn't written those down or started to think, you know what, we just played bad because these guys are terrible. That's why we played bad. That wouldn't have done me any good, and that whole experience would have been for naught. So I keep thinking that if we have, or when we have some success this year, it's going to be because of that. And so I think that's all very important, and we try and keep talking to these guys about that stuff. That it's not just hitting it well, and it's not just chipping and putting well. As elite of the skill set as they have now, it's got to be something else they use to separate themselves. And so that's where we put our energy as coaches.
And qualifying itself kind of helps you in the sense that, as we mentioned, you only have so many tournaments you can play together as a team. You have a fall schedule and a spring schedule. The qualifying kind of helps you because you have a pseudo tournament that's ongoing, and guys, have a chance to prepare for and look at their performance and give themselves a gauge of where they actually stand, because every shot counts all the time, but especially in that sense, like every shot's going to count. You're going to go out there and compete against everyone else on your team who are high quality players. So it kind of gives you the ability to test yourself. So I like what you said there. And one of the things I had a question about was, as far as the stats go, you said, it's a hard thing to get guys to keep stats. And both Cooper and I emphasize with that, because even we're more stats conscious, but even for us, like sometimes after a round, it can be hard to be like, all right, I got to go enter my stats. What kind of stats are you looking for your guys to keep?
Everything, really, with the programs and apps that they're all provided here with us, it's, they're getting shots gained information back. And so I just ask them to be as accurate as possible and take 5 or 10 minutes to do it. And it's funny because when stats are presented to them, even in Caleb's situation, he's like, I had told him, like, I think like the one thing he really needed to work on after the summer was his short game. And he's like, And then after he got done Bermuda, he's like, my short game's terrible. And I was like, because he saw his stats, and and so even him, like, that's something that I don't know what, like, I think a lot of it is they don't want to see bad stats, and they don't, a lot of kids, especially in this day and age at 18, 19 years old, they're still a little bit insecure, and they just want to hear the good stuff. And so we ask them all the time to be a little bit vulnerable and to understand that that's okay. And this is a long-term deal. But you do need to know and have some feedback, and stats are another form of feedback.
That's the truth. I talk about, when we talk about tournament golf, one of the things I say is, in the long run, it's a weighing machine, but in the short run, it's a voting machine. That's kind of the corollaries. You're familiar with financial markets. The saying is, in the short run, stock market's a voting machine. In the long run, it's a weighing machine. It's the same thing with stats. Yeah, like my putting might have sucked this week. And there's always, every week, there's always an excuse for it, in the sense like, he'd be like, oh, like that shot here, that shot there, like there's just a few little shots, et cetera. But when you all of a sudden stack up a season worth of stats and you say, man, over the course of a season, I lost 2 strokes putting, like there's no denying week in, week out that you're not putting the best. So being able to keep that as you go along, I can imagine, is very helpful. We mentioned the post round reflection. Jumping back to preparation, I know that's especially something at your level. You worked with Caleb, like preparing for the U.S. Junior. You've caddied for your guys, and then you obviously go to every tournament as the coach. What do you do to prepare your players for a tournament or a course?
Yeah, I think one of the things we've tried to do is meet like a week before we leave and talk about the golf course that we're going to play and the things that you probably need to have success on that, what you need to be doing well to have success on that golf course, and that gives them some time to go work on that stuff. Yeah, I think that everyone does the yardage books, and a lot of teams do the Google Earth, but I keep saying, I know I'm probably sound like a broken record, but I just keep going back. It's just, where's your mind at? And we always try and not damper expectations, but to not make them the forefront of what we're doing, and just keep going back to that process of, hey, if we do this as good as you guys are, we're going to have success. It's just trusting that and staying. I always say all the time, just stay out of the way of your preparation, because I know our preparation is really, really good. I know the talent level is really, really good. And if we can just stay out of the way of that, then success is going to come. It's when you get in the way of that with thinking that I need to do this and I need to do that, and this is about, I need to go finish second and I need to go make birdie, and all those things that you think you need to do that you don't. They just, those things happen. And so that's where we keep talking about that stuff, mindset. But that for me that's the preparation that's important.
I think it's easier the older you get to identify with that statement, at least because I remember when I was younger, there's, that you make a lot of bad decisions in general as a kid, and it's not that you're intentionally trying to, it's just like you get wrapped up in the moment. And when it comes to the golf course, it's the same thing. Cooper and I always describe it as like everything moving way too fast. It feels just like you got to get it done, and all of a sudden, like, it spirals out of control. And next thing you know, you've tripled this hole, you've doubled the next, and then you're like out of it. And so then as opposed to being like, all right, you're quote unquote out of it. So you're like, as opposed to, just relaxing and being like, all right, I'm going to go through my process. It's like, now I got to make up for the mistakes I made. And as you get older, your prefrontal cortex develops. And so you don't feel those same urges. And that was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen was like Will Zalatoris at the PGA Championship last year. Like, most people probably weren't that impressed by it, but the drop that he took off of that concrete, most I would imagine, even like college players, if they're in that scenario, like playing for a major, like in competition, they've hit a bad shot, they're back on this sidewalk, like they would not have spent 15 minutes to get relief. And then when they got that relief, they might not have had the mental presence to be able to hit that shot. And the shot he put to like 10 feet and then made the putt, that shot blew me away. And just that process. So when it comes to your players, as you said, like preparing mentally sounds like the most important thing for you to get them in the right spot. How exactly do you make sure that their expectations are aligned, or like at least help get them in that direction when you know that at 18 to 22, that's not where their mind wants to go?
Yeah, we just kind of try and use the experiences that they've gone through, and so that they can have, grasp the concept. And so last week was a perfect example. We didn't play as well as we probably should have, or in Puerto Rico, and we had a meeting the other day and went through some stuff. And I asked them, I was like, who here thought about winning the tournament before we got down there? And 7 hands went up. And I was like, and did any of you win? So it's a waste of time and emotion. It doesn't help that I think I want to win, or I need to win. Like that kind of like, hopefully getting some light bulbs to click on, like, this isn't how you win. And to be honest, when the first couple conversations I ever had with Caleb, one of his things was, I should have won 5 times last year. I could have been the player of the year. And I finished like second and third and fifth and sixth. And I was like, well, your first thing is thinking about winning the tournament. That's not helping you any. And we had about 2 weeks before he went to play the Terracotta Amateur down in Naples. And we talked about all that stuff. Like, you just can't, you can't control winning. I tell him all the time, like, well, what if you had tied for the lead and you shot 59 and the other guy shot 58? Like, was that a bad day? Did you like lose the tournament? And so like we just talk about where your energy goes and that the things that you can control. And he went down and he won the terracotta, and then he won about 6 of the next 9 tournaments he played in. And it was all about just not trying to win, just handling the things he could handle. And going back to like his preparation is so good that that's going to shine if he stays out of the way of it. So just stuff like that, going through those different scenarios that they can kind of grasp a little bit more of than me just telling them what I did, the mistakes I made.
That's perfect. I know we got time coming up, so I got only 2 more questions left, and then we'll head to wrap. But one of the things you said right there, is like afterwards, trying to make sure that they look back and stay on top of things and like recognize, hey, I shouldn't have thought ahead so much. One of the things that can happen in golf, and Cooper and I talk about this a lot with college players, is you're not just playing for yourself. We talked about when you were out playing on tour, like you're playing for yourself, you're playing for your wife and your kid, and that can be some added pressure. And in college golf, sometimes there's added pressure of having teammates. There's 4 other guys that you're going out and playing for, and you want to do well. And oftentimes when you play bad, you don't feel like you've just let down yourself. You feel like you've let down your teammates. And a lot of times you associate your self-worth with the score. And sometimes it can make for an awkward bus ride back, or like at least an unfun one when everyone's just in the bus and they're just mad about how they've played and they're stewing over it. So for you, when it comes to tournament wrap up, okay, things did not go as we wanted. Are there any particular ways that you try to make sure that guys are not saying, hey, I am Caleb Surratt 73, I am Cooper Collins 76, but kind of recognizing that, yeah, we didn't play good, we didn't do exactly what we wanted, but there's opportunity here still, and we don't need to live in that.
Yeah, I mean, I always just tell them like they're never going to be judged by their results. Or, for me, like I'm going to, measure them by their work ethic and their body language and their mental preparation and their mindset, and always just try and stay as far away from the results as we can. But at the end of the day, it's results based, and there's a scoreboard, and we're going to figure it out, and people are going to know if you did well or didn't do well. But we're going to try and figure out why, whether it's why did we do well or why didn't we do well, so that we can be very prepared for that situation the next time and just keep learning and learning. And all of the time, I tell them like the people that are elite, they have a long-term view of things, and people that are, results oriented, measure themselves day by day, they're just going to spin their wheels forever and ever. And so just try and keep hammering that home that, we didn't become a good program overnight, and you're not going to become a great player overnight. It's just doing the same thing that you need to do every day, having a plan and working that plan.
That's perfect. Well, the last question we ask every guest is, if you could go back to yourself as a junior golfer and tell yourself just one thing, what would that one thing be? And then for you, in your case, since you work with some guys that are younger or coming from junior golf, additionally, if you could tell a junior golfer just one thing, what would that one thing be?
I think it's just the same thing I talked about. Like, you have to have a long-term view of this. And it's really hard to not think that everybody's paying attention, but I promise you they're not. That, everyone else has their own lives going on. And if you do well, they'll notice it and tell you congratulations. But every round and every shot that you hit, it's not on a lot of people's minds other than yours and sometimes your parents. So I think if you can just get a grasp of the concept of, hey, I just need to keep doing this thing over and over and over again, and all of this is going to, take care of itself, and I'll be where I'm supposed to be, then that's going to help you and not slow you down. But if you start thinking, it would be like you're talking about the stock market. If you're going to buy Apple every day, it goes up, and sell it every day, it goes down, you're not going to make a whole lot of money. And that's what people do with their golf game. They play good and everything's good, and then they play bad and everything's bad, and I'm terrible, and then I'm great, and I'm terrible, and I'm great, and I got to practice. I don't need to practice, and you're not getting anything. This is what I need to do to be great, and if I keep doing this at certain checkpoints in my life and my career, it's going to work out. And I wish I'd have known that, because we all want to do things and think you have to prove it to people in the outside world, but that outside world, they're really not paying that much attention. They just want you to do well.
Absolutely. Well, We appreciate it. Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you on social media or anything like that, or ask you any other questions?
Yeah, Twitter and Instagram. I'm on Instagram probably more than Twitter these days, but it's Coach Webb UT Vols. But reach out there, and as long as you're not a high school recruitable kid, I'll reach back out.
Awesome. Give Coach Webb a follow, and then if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and leave us a rating. If you're listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. This helps us get our message out to more people. And if you're trying to find us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Tournament Code, on Instagram at The Tournament Code. As always, we enjoyed having you with us, and we look forward to diving in deeper to what it takes to play elite tournament golf.